In the panel, I have Julien from Argent, Kunho from Topology, and Jorik from Nethermind. So maybe I know you all have done some talks today. I know GGD from Topology, but could you do a few words, summarize what is it that you do, like your projects, just so people that are aware?
So I'm Julien, co-founder at Argent, and so Argent, we've been building wallets since 2018, and we started building the first wallet on Starknet, Argent X, basically when Starknet started, and we are still today the main wallet on Starknet. I think we have 80% of the users and 70% of the funds on Starknet are in Argent X. And we recently announced a second product, which is the web wallet that I demoed today. And we are also bringing Starknet to the Argent mobile application, which is coming very soon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kunho from Topology. Topology, I think, is a very difficult topic to talk about. Everyone starts asking, what exactly are you guys working on? We're kind of like a mystic creature that everyone's scratching their head, be like, what the hell? So just to say it simply, we're making deep on-chain worlds. And what we mean by it is that worlds that was created on virtually did not have a true meaning in it in a way because you couldn't create values or find values and meaningful activities. I think that's why the worlds that we see virtually right now is only for pure fun. We talk about games are for fun, and if you're not making fully on-chain games that is not fun, it's probably because we cannot seek any value. Like the reason why we came to this event and it's fun is because we're exchanging valuable information that we find incentivizing for us. By having fully on-chain mechanics on-chain, we can now have worlds that is longer, more perpetual than ourselves. So our children and grandchildren can live in this virtual world and seek values and create meaning in there. And how we mean by it is that we start small by making small little physics world and incremental steps to getting to that dream. But we are, I think Gigi also talked about it, we're fucking around a lot, trying to find how to get to that ideal world that we all want to have a interoperable and composable, perpetual virtual world that we're going to see about. And we're very excited about Starknet because the verifiable computation that we see on layer 2 and above will actually bring us closer to that dream.
Oh, I can't wait to play in the worlds that you create. That's going to be amazing. I am Jorik. I'm the co-CTO of Nethermind, and we are, I like to call us an ecosystem partner of Starknet. We work on a lot of tooling in that space and try to make developers and users' experiences better by providing things like block explorers, a compiler from Solid to Cairo, and a formal verification tool, which I think is a very exciting one that I want to talk about a lot in this one, so I might show that one a bit too much. And yeah, that is it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a brief introduction of all the three projects. So I guess the first question that I want to ask to all of you is that given that we have, not only Ethereum but multiple alternative layer ones and actually multiple rollups at this point, what was the deciding factor for you guys to actually focus on Starknet for your projects?
So for us at Argent, we've been building smart contract wallets, since 2018, and I guess we experienced some of the limitation of Ethereum, and we see these limitations as being twofold. One was limitation in terms of scalability, which made transaction expensive, and to build a dream user experience for all types of users, we needed to find a base with cheap transactions, so solution that scale, and for that ZK rollups are, to our beliefs, the best solution. But we also believe that we needed to scale the user experience of self-custody. Because if you only scale the technology, you can only go so far. In the end, we are building product for users, and so we needed to have an underlying technology that scaled, but we also wanted to scale the user experience. And for that, we needed account abstraction, and StarkWare had the great idea to actually launch with native account abstraction. So it's basically the two things that we are looking for, scaling of transaction and account abstraction represented in Starknet, so it was a no-brainer to start building there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
Oh, yeah. I mean, for topology, I think one of the most interesting thing for us is, I mean, it's the same verifiable compute that we haven't seen before that is possible. I know that we're getting there, but we're actually very excited about the long-term feasibility of ZKVM. And topology, I think we talked about more about the future of this, as some people might say, it's a lofty, very long-term goal, but we're really banking on, or we have a true conviction on it, and we want to work on things that's going to last, that has a true long-term goal. And what we love about this ecosystem is that unlike other layer ones or alternative layer ones, developers who are building on this ecosystem are truly long-term. It's more the difference between the mercenaries and visionaries. And we really appreciate to work with visionary because our vision to create this perpetual on-chain world is not something that's going to happen in 1 or 2 years. Our horizon is 5 to 10 years, and we're really excited to work on it. And hopefully, by fucking around, we'll find something and bring some value to this world.
I think on the Nethermind side, we were very closely aligned to Ethereum and built our node there, and Smash is deeply involved in the community there. And I think his real motivation, I'm going to talk about my CEO a bit, but he wants to make a borderless economy and see the world like really flourish and grow a lot. And I think one of the pieces that he sees there is making a framework that truly scales. So it's a bit under the stereotype of like, let's onboard as many people as possible, but like the main mission is really scale the throughput that Ethereum can have. And I think when he met the Starknet guys, he saw visionaries who were thinking super far in the long term, not just L2, but fractal scaling, and let's go further than that and see if we can create as much scalability as possible. And from there that vision grew inside Nethermind, and we realized to support Ethereum, we should support Starknet. So that's kind of the basis of our decision making there. And like on my side, I joined this not knowing anything about this. I was like, ooh, yeah, crypto, cool, let's see what this is about. And what I got was a community of people who loved building, and building on stuff that they like to fuck around on. Like I've met developers who are like, this project is probably useless, but I've had so much fun doing it that I'd rather not do anything else. And it's a rare experience, and I want to support that as much as possible in Starknet, and I want to also bring it out to everyone else. So that's like Nethermind's take and my personal take on why we're here.
Yeah, so what I heard from the three of you is that it's basically the off-chain computation, lower transaction fees, and better user experience, a way to summarize. Yeah. But I actually want to focus on the last one, user experience, because I think that's going to be critical to bring more users to the ecosystem. And I know on Starknet there are different features that impact positively the user experience, but if you were to pick just one, which feature of Starknet do you think will have the most positive impact on user experience, and why?
I guess I'm holding the mic, so I'll go from this direction. Okay, so we're quite dev-centered, so I'm going to focus on that front. And I'm actually really excited for Cairo 1 because it encapsulates all of the low-level primitives of working with ZK and writing it efficiently. So you get to write efficient code, and you can push it to the max. But they've also been taking loads of things from the Rust playbook, which means like you can start doing like really crazy stuff. Like you have a nice trait system, you can express a bunch of really cool things in that, or you can use macros, and suddenly you can step away from the Solidity world where you are confined to a particular storage model and like, okay, your array is stored at this hash index or whatever. You can build a whole macro system to make your own storage, like layouts for whatever efficient way that you want. Or I could produce libraries of macros that give you completely different configurations. So you have way more expressivity and power in this than going down to like the low-level EVM, like opcodes and writing everything by hand to optimize. So this is one of the things that I think like you're going to start seeing people build bigger things than they did before because you've got package management, you've got these macro systems, and suddenly you can and a really nice type system, which Slitty doesn't have it either. So you can deal with much more complex like code bases much more easily. So I'm hoping that we see like protocols that are much bigger to use, and that's like one of the cool things for a user dev. Like that's.
All right, so Cairo 1 and the tooling that enables any type of programming that you can do there. Okay, so mostly dev experience. Okay, cool. Anyone else want to comment?
Well, I think Julien can speak a lot better, but
I know which one Julian's gonna pick. So.
but I'll leave it up to Julien. But account abstraction. But I'll leave it up to the expert.
No, for sure, you said it. For me, account abstraction is really what will enable amazing user experience. But within account abstraction, I think there's a low-hanging fruit, which I'm very happy with, is the concept of multi-call. And again, that's something when we're discussing with Tom and Martin from OpenZeppelin, we're trying to conceive the interface of the account. That's something that we realized that we should push that to be now, and to make basically multi-call a default, of account on Starknet. And so for me, that's really the low-hanging fruit, because that's something that any developer can benefit today. It's very simple, and that really enables to make, as I showed in my slide, you can make everything one click. And that's amazingly powerful. I think people forget how many transactions we need to do on Ethereum and how it is stressful. I mean, when I go on L1 and I need to do interact with any DeFi protocol, I'm literally sweating 2 liters of water, because every single one of these operations, I can make a mistake, it can be, it can revert, maybe my gas fee is too low and so on. So having the ability to just in one click do stuff extremely complex, for me is an unlocker of a real design.
Yeah. To be fair, for me, also account abstraction was one of those key features, especially to onboard more people and kind of forget that they're using the blockchain and more like this is a system that I can use easily. But I actually love the talk that you have on account abstraction. I think highlights very well all the possibilities. But Jorik, you touched an important point about Cairo and Cairo 1. So, some people criticize StarkWare because we create our own programming language, Cairo, instead of using Solidity. So I wonder what has been your experience using Cairo, and maybe if you have tried Cairo 1, what's been your opinion so far of the language?
Yeah, I think Topology, it was a lot better than Circom. So that's why we're like, oh, this is so much better. But what we've seen for the evolution from evolution to Cairo 1, from our experience, it's like a euphoria. Like the things that you couldn't have done, it's so much better. And I think just going back to, I think people start comparing to Cairo to Solidity. But from our perspective, if you really want to work on ZK, more, I think, accurate comparison would be like Circum versus Cairo. And for us, it's a no-brainer. We always choose Cairo, and Cairo 1.0, I think, has literally our team was just like crying because, oh, this is so much better. It will shorten so much time for us.
Well, I know that you probably built a lot of the really cool stuff you did in like a euphoric, like, cool, let's do this. But from like a seasoned dev perspective, that was like masochistic what you guys pulled off. And that was the experience with Cairo, was that it was a proof that this could be done very well. But they never made the statement that was going to be the best version that it was, right? So it's really nice to see like StarkWare like fulfilling the promise of like improving the language and making it more user friendly. But like it was actually quite painful at the start, and I'm really happy Cairo 1 is around. And I think that we should acknowledge this, and that we should everyone should just work as hard as possible at like setting good standards for Cairo 1, and like understanding how to use it in safe ways and how to interact with it. Yeah, so I'm very excited, and I think it's bringing a lot of extra specialty. I already said it, so I don't think much more to add here, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, Cairo has never been a blocker. We've always been supportive of that choice, because I think in the end you need to use the right tool for the right challenge, and there's no reason to use a language that's not meant for for validity proof. So I think making Cairo was a good choice. the first versions of Cairo were a bit challenging. I didn't come from Circom, so I was coming from Solidity, so yes, it was a little bit of a challenge. But actually, I started writing smart contract in Solidity in 2017, and back then Solidity was shit. And it was a challenge, so people forget how much Solidity has improved and the 2D
has evolved a lot.
Exactly, over the past 4 or 5 years. So actually for me that was kind of an excitement because I was feeling I was again hacking on something, at the cutting edge. So it was a bit of a challenge, but it was actually a lot of fun. And yes, another team has started working with Cairo 1.0, and yes, it's a clear improvement. Things are much more simple. There's no more, all these built-ins that you need to pass and all these. At some point with Cairo 0, I was saying I was doing some kind of voodoo, because even though I understood how stuff should be built, you had all this temp var and local var that sometimes you had to put, and even though you understood the logic and that you shouldn't have to do that, it was still not compiling, so I was just kind of doing trial and errors. That was really the early days. And when you see now, it's almost like Rust, so it's an amazing improvement. Yeah.
Very soon using Cairo 0 will be a sign of being an OG in the ecosystem. Jorik, you want to say something else?
Yeah, speaking of all those, this is something that I really like about the way the language has been designed, and was really frustrating for us at the start when we were building Warp, was that they exposed all these really low-level primitives, and were saying you need to still think about these to be able to make efficient code. So we're going to make sure that you force you to think about it by exposing all of it, right? And I'm actually, at the time, I was like, please guys, abstract everything, let me go as quickly as possible. And I'm really glad they stuck to it, because I think Cairo 1 is striking a really nice balance between these two concepts. So it wouldn't have gotten to that stage if they just abstracted all the way at the start. It would have gotten much more maybe too high level. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Julien, you also mentioned about your experience of Solidity, then going to Cairo, and I don't think everyone here will know Cairo or have used it, but I guess many of them have actually used Solidity. So I guess question for you. What do you think are the biggest challenges for someone who has only used Solidity to actually learn Cairo?
Actually, a lot of people ask me this, and if you're a good Solidity dev, you can do Cairo. I think.
About Cairo 0, Cairo 1?
Cairo 1 definitely.
Okay.
Cairo 0, there was edge cases to the compiler that you had to understand, right? That was the difference here. But all your primitives are okay, most of how your contracts interact are the same. How your storage works is more or less the same. And so it was just okay, the arithmetic is different, but you could use libraries to get over that fact, right? You can use the uint56. So you needed to know what the pitfalls were, and that was the hard part, was understanding that using felt arithmetic was not the same thing as using uint56. But once you learned that, everything that you learned from Solidity just mapped over perfectly fine, right? Mutable memory, that was hard. That's probably the biggest one. That is still the case, and that's probably the biggest challenge that you need to get as a Solidity dev. To understand is that you need to use a special structure to be able to make mutable memory references as well. But otherwise, squint a bit, and the structures are the same, and yeah. So it's not. Yeah.
So that it's not that hard.
Yeah, I don't think I think there's a lot of where Cairo was hard, and I think it was hard because it was an alpha. But
okay.
What Cairo was building into is not going to be hard. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at Topology, I think as Jorik talked about, there's a big difference between Cairo and Cairo 1, Cairo 0. And we actually prefer people who haven't done Solidity. It's because there's a lot of baggage from Solidity, and you have different sets of expectations. Because once you start from Cairo, I think you start fresh, and you need to learn about Stark and ZKP, and I think that's, once you understand that, you understand why Cairo is written and built in such a way. And I think that fundamental understanding is very important for any, I can only say for Topology's a team member, is to have that understanding and then start building a smart contract on Starknet. So we actually like talking to people who are excited about this space, but really haven't delved a lot in Solidity, and come fresh and learn from a perspective of learning Stark and ZKP. I think if you're coming from Solidity, I think you have a whole sort of different expectation and don't want to learn it and think like, why do I have to learn a whole new thing? And I think that mental barrier is the biggest challenge for anyone to learn a new thing. Yeah.
That's an interesting take. Actually, I was going to say, for me, the challenge is not going from Solidity to Cairo. What's maybe complicated is it's coming from a non-smart contract language to a smart contract language, because programming a web application is not the same as programming a smart contract. So you need to understand the beast that you are, manipulating with your contract. But once you understand that, whether it's Cairo or Solidity, it's exactly the same.
All right, so talking about still the developer experience, you're all developers. So I wonder, what are your go-to tools for programming, for testing, for deploying and starting? What's your dev tool look like in your everyday operation?
We can talk. I think topology is, as we said before, Guilty Gears talked about it. We like to fuck around a lot. So there's not really specific dev tools that we use, but we really love using Apibara because we need to simulate the world. That's one of the most interesting things that we use. But in terms of dev tools, we're at a very experimental phase, so we use a lot of things, so can't really say there's one thing, yeah. But I'm sure you guys have a very different thoughts on this, so I would love to learn these useful dev tools.
I mean, for Nethermind, we build a lot of stuff that's like infrastructure based, so we interface with some tools, but we don't use a lot. There is a section of the team that does focus a lot on application layer development, and what I get from them is just Protostar. Like, that's basically the main thing that they use in the development cycle. But I would love to see more competitors in that space and see like other ways of handling it, like sort of like a Forge v like whatever thing. Yeah, the one I want to highlight is Horus, really, because sorry, this is a show, but it's not regularly you get an ATP that's ready so early, and then you can start like formally verifying your work as you go, right? Like moving it to the very start is kind of an interesting proposition. So I want the next panel someone to tell me if using Horus from the start was a good idea or a bad idea and why, and that's what I would love to see in the future. So
I'm excited about the Horus. That's one thing that I actually want to learn myself as well.
So for me, I mean, it's maybe a bit lousy, but I'm not actually a programmer. I'm a physicist. So I don't get excited by tooling. What I like is writing smart contract, is the abstraction, the logic. And when I have a tool that works, actually I won't spend the energy trying to try the new kid on the block. I have something that works. I just want to focus on my smart contract. And since I started early, I started with Nile from OpenZeppelin because that was the only tool available at that point, and so I'm still using, well, not for 1.0, but for pre-1.0, still using Nile because I didn't want to spend the time, researching another tool. I had something that works. I just wanted to focus on the contracts and the logic.
I actually use Argent X as one of my dev tools to deploy in a way using a UI. I think it's much simpler than using a CLI.
Actually, it's funny because that's what happens when you use a product. Actually, that feature is something I suggested because having to deploy a contract, I was deploying the contract with Nile many times, and at some point it became a bit annoying. So I was like, it would be so easy if we could, just have one click in Argent X. We have everything. So actually, that's what I like as well. Like being a developer, when you're building a product, is that you can use your own product to solve your own problems, and that's the best virtuous cycle.
Yes, it's fun. It was a tool that I didn't know I needed until I tried. Okay, so maybe just to close, just the last question, just talking about Cairo 1, is there a specific feature about Cairo 1 that you're the most looking forward to have for your products or for your development?
So for me, it's a very silly feature, but for those who've been looking at the account interface, I mentioned that we designed the account interface with StarkWare, Tom and Martin from OpenZeppelin, and because we wanted to use multi-call. If a multi-call is basically an array of structs that contain an array, because each call contains call data, and you want to have an array of such call. And so basically you have two unbounded objects, and that was not possible in Cairo 0. something. And so we had to come up with kind of a hack when we pass the call data separately, and so the interface is ugly, and that has frustrated me a lot. So every month I would ping Tom, when can we have array of struct containing arrays? He would say, oh, later, and it was never coming. And then comes Cairo 1.0, and I had the chance to discuss at Tel Aviv with Shahar. And actually, it's out of the box. He said there's nothing to do. We just need to do the third, which actually is still not completely working. But because the language is so much better, they didn't need to do anything. It was out of the box, working. So for me, that's something that gets me excited because we can finally have a clean interface for accounts. And I don't like to write ugly code. So that's a big frustration for me. That will be lifted off thanks to Cairo 1.0.
Where to start, man? Where to start? There's like, coming from the warp side, like there's so many things that we ran into trying to get these things to work. For example, one of the massive foot guns in Cairo 0 was that if you imported like one external function from another file, you implicitly imported all of them, right? So if you're like, oh, I really like the way that this like transfer function works, you might also import the like, anyone can approve any amount to anybody. You have no idea what you're importing. So a good module system with good namespacing that will import exactly what you think it does, that you can rename as like nicely as you want, that's going to be fantastic. There's hints of that in Cairo 0 already. Then like type predicated objects, like dict access is where you can store complex types rather than serializing and deserializing them yourself. Like, amazing. So that part I'm looking forward to. And it's going to clean up the output of warp like by crazy amounts. Like right now it's hard to read what it puts out, but under Cairo 1 I'm pretty sure that like an average dev would be able to look at it and be like, I understand what's going on here. So that's one. And then yeah, I think I've already talked about it before. Macros, everything, yeah, the whole shebang.
I'm just happy there's only one way to declare a variable because it drove me crazy trying to explain the 3 different ways to declare a variable in Cairo 0 and the small difference in between them. So
Yeah,
that's
really subtle.
well, that concludes our panel. Thank you very much, Julien, Kunho, and Jorik. So applause for them. Thank you.